In the depths of a dilapidated spaceship, nestled within the cold metallic embrace of a forgotten hangar, two alien figures hovered in a heated argument. Their voices, though incomprehensible to any human ear, echoed with an urgency that reverberated through the ship's decaying structure. The dim, flickering lights cast shadows across their features, revealing a mix of desperation and fear. "We cannot keep him," the female alien insisted, her iridescent skin shimmering in the low light. "He is a burden. Look at him. He can't even walk." Her partner, a hulking figure with deep-set eyes, turned away, fists clenched in frustration. "He is our son. He deserves a chance, no matter his condition." "A chance?" she scoffed, her voice rising. "What chance does he have on this dying planet? We can't afford to care for him. The Council will never accept him. And what about our mission? We must choose, and it has to be now." Outside, the winds howled through the remnants of Earth's once thriving cities, a constant reminder of the devastation that had unfolded. The air was thick with dust and despair, littered with the remains of a society that had crumbled under its own weight. The spaceship, abandoned and forgotten, was merely a fleeting shelter in a world where survival was a daily battle. As the argument reached a crescendo, the male alien's resolve faltered. He looked down at the small bundle nestled in the corner of the ship, wrapped in tattered rags. The baby, ZYX, cooed softly, his luminescent green skin glowing faintly in the dim light. His large, expressive eyes held a vulnerability that pierced through the tension in the air. With a heavy heart, the father stepped closer to his child, cradling him in his arms. "He deserves love. A chance to grow," he murmured, his voice breaking. "He is not just a weapon. He is our son." The mother's expression softened momentarily, but the harsh reality quickly clouded her face again. "We aren't equipped to care for him. It's too dangerous. We have to leave him here, or we'll risk everything." Silence fell between them, a weighty pause filled with unspoken sorrow. The father's grip on ZYX tightened, and for a fleeting moment, he contemplated defiance. But the voices of reason, the threats from the Council, echoed in his mind, reminding him of their impending doom. "We can't go back," she whispered, filled with resignation. "We have to protect ourselves. It's the only way." His heart heavy with despair, he nodded reluctantly, tears pooling in his glowing eyes. I understand. But I will always love him," he promised, a vow that would echo through the cosmos. With trembling hands, he gently placed ZYX onto a bed of rusted metal scraps, wrapped in the rags that had been his only comfort. "Goodbye, my son," he whispered, brushing a finger across the baby's forehead, lingering for a moment before stepping back. The mother turned away, her heart hardened against the pain. As they climbed into the ship's cockpit, a final glance confirmed their decision. ZYX, small and helpless, remained alone amidst the wreckage of his parents' choices. Meanwhile, in the heart of the crumbling city below, Flint, a rugged mechanic with a weathered face and grease-stained overalls, combed through the remnants of a world gone awry. The sun had long since been obscured by clouds of ash and smoke, casting an eternal twilight over the streets. Flint's hands, calloused and rough, sifted through heaps of metal and debris, searching for anything salvageable. "Come on, just one more piece," he muttered, digging deeper into the wreckage. The air was thick with the smell of rust and decay, a familiar scent that had become a part of him over the years. Flint had learned to survive in this desolate world, his mechanical skills a lifeline amidst the chaos. As he pulled a large plate of metal from the ground, a glimmer caught his eye. Frowning, he shifted the debris aside, revealing a small, battered spaceship nestled among the ruins. Its surface was marred with scorch marks, clearly having seen better days. Flint's curiosity piqued. He approached the ship cautiously, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the dust-ridden ground. "Who would leave a hunk of junk like this behind?" he mused, glancing around to make sure he was alone. The last thing he needed was a run-in with scavengers. His instincts urged him to turn back, but something inexplicable drew him closer. Flint knelt beside the ship, brushing away the grime to reveal a hatch. With a grunt, he pried it open, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, the low light flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. And then he saw it. Wrapped in rags, lying amidst the remnants of the ship, was ZYX. The baby's shimmering green skin glowed softly, illuminating the darkness around him. Flint's breath hitched. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. The infant's large, luminescent eyes blinked up at him, filled with a mixture of wonder and fear. Holy hell! Flint breathed, his heart racing. What in the world are you? He had seen many strange things in his years scavenging the city, but nothing compared to this. ZYX cooed softly, his tiny fingers reaching out instinctively, sensing Flint's presence. The mechanic's rugged exterior melted away, replaced by an overwhelming urge to protect the vulnerable creature before him. "You're all alone, aren't you?" he murmured, his voice softening. "What happened to your parents?" Flint found a clean blanket that had once belonged to an old passenger vehicle. Its faded blue color reminded him of the sky, a stark contrast to the grim reality surrounding them. Returning to ZYX, Flint carefully draped the blanket over the baby, who cooed contentedly. "There we go. Much better, huh?" he said, watching as ZYX snuggled into the fabric. The glow around him pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. Flint leaned against the wall, arms crossed, observing this extraordinary creature. "What are you doing here, ZYX? You're so far from home," he murmured, more to himself than to the baby. He had no answers, only questions swirling in his mind. The workshop was a sanctuary, albeit a run-down one. The walls were lined with tools that had seen better days, some rusted beyond repair, others waiting for the right moment to be useful again. Flint's life had always revolved around fixing things, machines, vehicles, and sometimes even broken dreams. But ZYX was different. He wasn't something Flint could fix. He was something Flint needed to understand. As the hours passed, Flint became captivated by ZYX's playful nature. The baby began levitating small objects around the workshop, mesmerizing Flint with his abilities. A wrench floated gracefully in the air, spinning slowly as ZYX giggled, reaching for it with his tiny fingers. "Careful there, little one," Flint chuckled, his heart swelling with pride. "Don't want to hit your head with that thing." ZYX's laughter filled the workshop, and Flint couldn't help but smile. It was a sound he hadn't heard in so long, a reminder of a time before the world had crumbled, when laughter was part of living, not a luxury. "You know what? I think you might be the best thing to happen to me in a long time," Flint said, crouching down to ZYX's level. "I mean, look at you. You're a little miracle." ZYX paused, his glowing skin shifting shades of blue and green, as if he understood Flint's words. Then, with a determined look, he reached out again. This time, a small oil lamp on the table began to float, illuminating the workshop with a warm glow. "Whoa, easy there," Flint exclaimed, his eyes wide with surprise. "You're gonna set this place on fire." ZYX giggled again, and the lamp hovered over to Flint, who instinctively caught it before it could fall. He held it up, marveling at the baby's control. "How are you doing this? It's like you've got magic in you." As the glow intensified, Flint felt something stir inside him, a spark of hope in a world filled with despair. ZYX was a beacon of light, and Flint realized their bond was no accident. It was perhaps a chance at redemption for both of them. Just then, distant shouting shattered the solitude of the workshop. Flint's heart sank, the reality of their situation crashing down on him. They weren't safe here. The world outside was dangerous, filled with scavengers who would exploit a creature like ZYX. "Listen, buddy," Flint said, lowering his voice as he gathered ZYX close. "We need to be careful. There are people out there who wouldn't think twice about using you for their own gain." ZYX gazed up at Flint, his wide eyes innocent, and Flint felt a pang of guilt. He was trying to protect a being that had already endured so much. "I know it's not fair," he continued, gently stroking ZYX's small head, "but I promise to keep you safe. I won't let anyone hurt you." With that promise hanging in the air, Flint set the oil lamp back on the table, its warm glow casting flickering shadows on the walls. He turned his attention back to ZYX, who was watching him intently. "Let's see what other tricks you've got, huh?" As the baby resumed his floating game, Flint felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't just surviving, he was living. The bond between them was growing stronger, and as ZYX's abilities began to manifest, Flint sensed they were destined for something greater than just survival. The workshop filled with laughter and light, a small oasis in an unforgiving world. Flint had stumbled upon a miracle, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Flint pushed through the crumbling remnants of what used to be a bustling urban environment, now reduced to a ghostly echo of its former self. The air was thick with dust and decay, and the faint hum of distant machinery provided a backdrop to his thoughts. ZYX, nestled securely in the crook of Flint's arm, looked around with wide, luminescent eyes that flickered with curiosity, his emerald skin glistening under the sparse sunlight breaking through the jagged skyline. "Keep close, little one," Flint muttered, his voice gruff but laced with a tenderness he never thought he could possess. He adjusted his grip on the baby, mindful of the otherworldly energy ZYX carried, an energy that vibrated with potential. They entered an abandoned warehouse, its entrance cloaked in shadows. The once vibrant graffiti on the walls was now faded and peeling. "Let's see if we can find anything useful in here," Flint said, scanning the debris-strewn floor. Old crates lay scattered around, many splintered and decaying. But Flint had learned that even the most insignificant-looking items could be repurposed. As Flint rummaged through the remnants of the past, ZYX's attention was drawn to a glimmering object nestled beneath a pile of rusted metal scraps. With an instinctive motion, the baby reached out, and to Flint's astonishment, the object began to levitate, rising gently into the air before settling softly into ZYX's tiny hands. "Whoa, did you just do that?" Flint exclaimed, awe in his voice. ZYX cooed softly, his eyes sparkling with light as he played with the object, a broken piece of glass that reflected the dim light in a spectrum of colors. "You're something special, aren't you?" Flint said, chuckling softly. "Just don't let it go to your head." Suddenly, the sound of shuffling footsteps echoed through the warehouse, cutting through the moment like a knife. Flint's instincts kicked in. He crouched low, pulling ZYX close to his chest. From the shadows, a group of ragged scavengers emerged, their eyes gleaming with malice. Flint recognized them immediately, a notorious band that had been terrorizing the outskirts of the city, seeking out the vulnerable to exploit. "Look what we have here," one of the scavengers sneered. "A broken-down mechanic and a little green freak. This is too easy." Flint's mind raced. He had to protect ZYX. "You don't want to mess with us," he warned, his voice steady despite the fear brewing in his chest. "Back off, or you'll regret it." The scavengers laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed in the hollow space. "Regret? You think we're afraid of you?" The leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward, brandishing a rusted knife. "We're gonna take that little alien and see how much it's worth. And you're just in the way." "ZYX, hold on tight," Flint whispered urgently, positioning himself in front of the baby, ready to defend him with everything he had. In that moment, ZYX's eyes glowed brighter, a soft hum filling the air as he sensed the danger surrounding them. Without warning, a wave of energy surged from the baby, enveloping Flint and creating a shimmering barrier that pulsed with an ethereal light. The scavengers recoiled, their bravado replaced by fear. "What the hell is that?" one of them shouted, stumbling backward. "Get him," the leader commanded, lunging forward, but Flint was ready. He grabbed a metal pipe from the ground and swung it with all his might, hitting the leader squarely in the side, sending him crashing into a pile of debris. "Run, ZYX," Flint shouted, his heart racing. The baby, responding to Flint's urgency, intensified the barrier around them, pushing the scavengers back with a force that sent them sprawling. Seizing the opportunity, Flint dashed for the exit, ZYX nestled tightly against him. The weight of their situation was evident, yet ZYX possessed a wisdom that belied his young age. "Yeah, buddy," Flint replied, crouching down to meet ZYX's gaze. "Safe." ZYX asked, his large eyes searching Flint's face for reassurance. Flint felt a pang in his chest. "I'll do everything I can to keep you safe, I promise," he said earnestly. "You're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out together." ZYX reached out his tiny fingers, brushing against Flint's hand, a gesture that filled Flint with warmth. He had spent so long isolated in his world of machinery and despair. But now, with ZYX by his side, he felt a flicker of hope growing inside him. Staring into ZYX's luminous eyes, Flint realized that their fates were intertwined in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. Whatever dangers lay ahead, they would face them together, forging a bond that transcended the desolation around them. With steely resolve, Flint set to work, determined to protect the precious life he had come to cherish. The scavengers were relentless, but Flint would not let them take ZYX from him. This was just the beginning of their journey, a journey that would test both their strengths and spirits in the days to come. As the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the crumbling city, Flint moved through the debris-strewn streets. His calloused hands clutched a makeshift bag filled with scavenged parts. ZYX, nestled against his chest, was a small green figure wrapped in a threadbare blanket, his luminescent eyes peering out with curiosity and innocence. The bond between them had grown stronger since their first encounter, and Flint felt a deep protectiveness toward the alien child. The air was thick with the smell of rust and decay as Flint led the way, his boots crunching on broken glass and twisted metal. ZYX emitted soft glows occasionally, sensing Flint's emotions. Today, his light flickered a gentle blue, reflecting Flint's determination mixed with an undercurrent of anxiety. Flint glanced down, heart swelling at the sight of the baby who had somehow breathed new life into his weary existence. "Don't worry, little one," Flint said, his voice gruff but tender. "We'll find a place where you can be safe. Just stick close to me." ZYX responded with a cooing sound, his eyes widening in understanding. Flint often spoke to him, even if they couldn't communicate in words. There was a connection between them that transcended language, a shared understanding forged in the fires of survival. As they ventured deeper into the city, Flint suddenly halted, his instincts kicking in. Ahead lay a narrow alleyway, partially concealed by debris, but Flint sensed movement. He motioned for ZYX to stay behind him. "Wait here," he whispered, crouching low as he approached the alley's entrance. Peering around the corner, he spotted a group of ragged survivors huddled together, their faces drawn and gaunt. Flint recognized them. They were part of a community he had heard whispers about. These were people resisting the regime's oppressive rule. He felt a mix of hope and apprehension. Would they accept ZYX or see him as a threat? "Flint," a voice called out, breaking his reverie. He turned to see Max, the community's fierce leader, striding toward him with a determined look. Max was tall and muscular, with a scar running down his face, telling stories of past battles. Flint had always respected him, but he knew Max didn't easily trust outsiders, especially not an alien child. "Max," Flint replied, forcing a smile. "I was just scavenging, or hiding something." Max interrupted, his tone skeptical as he glanced at ZYX, who was peeking from behind Flint's shoulder. "What's that?" Flint straightened, taking a breath. "This is ZYX," he said, stepping aside to reveal the little alien. "He's not like us, but he's not a threat. He has abilities, extraordinary ones. I think he can help us." Max's eyes narrowed, his arms crossing over his chest. "Abilities? What kind of abilities?" "Look," Flint said, frustration creeping into his voice. "He can levitate objects, create light, and I believe he can do more. We need all the help we can get against the regime and ZYX. He has potential to bring more trouble than we need," Max replied, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't know what the regime will do if they find out about him. They'll come for us, Flint. We've done well to stay hidden." "Max, you have to trust me," Flint pleaded. "I've seen him in action. We escaped a group of scavengers because of him." The tension between them rose like a brewing storm. "We can't keep living in fear, not with the regime tightening its grip. ZYX could be our key to turning the tide." Max studied Flint's face, his expression hard. I've seen good people get killed over misplaced faith. What makes you think this creature is any different? Because I believe in him, Flint said, his voice steady despite the escalating situation. He's not just some alien baby. He's a symbol of hope. We can't afford to turn our backs on that. The silence that followed was heavy, the air thick with uncertainty. ZYX, sensing the tension, reached out with a tiny hand, a soft glow emanating from him as he looked up at Flint, then back at Max. The light pulsed gently, illuminating the alleyway and casting flickering shadows on the walls. Max's expression softened slightly, but he still held his ground. I'll need to see proof. If he can do what you say, then maybe we can talk. But if he poses a danger to us, I won't hesitate to cut ties. Flint nodded, understanding the weight of Max's words. That's fair. Just give him a chance. Fine, but we do this my way, Max said, turning to the group gathered behind him. Everyone, step back. Let's see what this kid can do. Flint's heart raced as he stepped back, positioning ZYX in front of him. You ready, buddy? He asked, his voice low and encouraging. ZYX's eyes sparkled with anticipation, and he nodded, the glow around him intensifying. Show us, Max commanded, his tone firm but not unkind. ZYX took a deep breath, focusing his energy. The air around him shimmered, and suddenly, a small pile of debris began to levitate. Flint watched in awe as ZYX manipulated the objects, swirling them in the air like a dance, creating a mesmerizing spectacle. The survivors gasped, their eyes wide with disbelief. Now, let's see more, Max urged, his skepticism giving way to intrigue. With a flick of his wrist, ZYX produced a radiant sphere of light that hovered above his palm. It pulsed with warmth, illuminating the dark alleyway and casting away the shadows. Flint could see the expressions of the onlookers shift from doubt to wonder, their faces reflecting the soft glow. Impressive, isn't it? Flint said, a grin spreading across his face. He can do so much more. Max stepped closer, his eyes narrowing in concentration. All right, this is something we can work with, but we need to keep a low profile. The regime has eyes everywhere, and if they catch wind of an alien child with powers, we all pay the price. Flint nodded, relief washing over him. I understand. We'll keep him hidden until we figure out how to harness his abilities safely. Good. Follow me, Max instructed, motioning for Flint and ZYX to join him as they moved deeper into the shadows. Flint felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of something new, a chance to fight back against the tyranny that had plagued their lives for so long. As they reached the entrance to the hidden community, Flint glanced down at ZYX, who was still glowing softly with excitement. You did great, little one. You've shown them what you can do, he said, his voice filled with pride. ZYX cooed in response, his eyes sparkling with joy. Together, they stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The air around ZYX crackled, and slowly the barrier grew thicker, shimmering with a brilliant light that illuminated the courtyard. The villagers watched in astonishment, some even stepping closer, emboldened by ZYX's courage. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the outer perimeter of the community. Flint's heart sank. They're here, he whispered, rising to his feet and scanning the shadows. Panic rippled through the crowd as they began to murmur nervously. Stay close to ZYX, Flint shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He can protect you. As the enforcers of the regime burst into the courtyard, weapons drawn and faces masked, Flint felt a surge of adrenaline. He positioned himself in front of ZYX, ready to defend him at all costs. The barrier pulsed like a heartbeat, shimmering with energy as it absorbed the hostile force. Get back, Max yelled, brandishing a makeshift weapon and rallying the villagers to stand their ground. Flint felt a mix of admiration and fear for her bravery. She had been skeptical, but now she was fighting alongside ZYX, believing in him. ZYX, Flint called out, his voice steady despite the rising tension. You need to hold the barrier. Don't let them through. ZYX nodded, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort. The barrier shimmered with every ounce of his strength, and Flint could see the enforcers hesitating, unsure whether to advance or retreat. "Push them back," Max shouted, and the villagers rallied, throwing whatever they could find. Flint joined in, launching a rusted piece of metal at the closest enforcer, who stumbled back, caught off guard. The enforcers exchanged glances, their confusion turning to anger. "What the hell is this?" one of them shouted, adjusting his weapon. "You think you can hide behind a freak?" Flint's blood boiled. "Leave him alone. He's more than you'll ever understand." Just then, ZYX let out a cry, and the barrier expanded outward, pushing the enforcers with a force that sent them sprawling. Flint watched in awe as the regime's soldiers were thrust away, their weapons clattering to the ground. "Keep going, ZYX," Flint encouraged, his voice filled with fervor. The energy around them pulsed brighter, and the villagers erupted into cheers, emboldened by ZYX's display of power. But the moment was short-lived. A sharp voice cut through the celebration. "This isn't over." It was the leader of the enforcers, his eyes burning with rage. "You will pay for this. We know where to find you." Flint's heart sank, dread pooling in his stomach. The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. He turned to ZYX, whose face was pale with exhaustion. "Did you hear that?" Flint said urgently. "We need to go now." ZYX nodded, but Flint could see the toll it had taken on him. The barrier wavered, flickering uncertainly as ZYX struggled to maintain it. The villagers were still cheering, but Flint knew the danger was far from over. As they began to disperse, Flint felt a vibration in his pocket. He pulled out a small, battered communicator, its screen flickering to life. A message flashed across it, sending chills down his spine. "We know about the alien. Pay us, or we expose him." Flint's hands tightened around the device, panic surging through him. The scavengers were threatening to reveal ZYX's existence to the world, and Flint could only imagine the consequences. "ZYX, we need to talk," he said urgently, kneeling down to meet the baby's gaze. "What is it, Flint?" ZYX asked, his voice small but steady. "The scavengers, they're onto us. If they expose you, everything we fought for will be in jeopardy," Flint explained, his mind racing. ZYX's eyes widened, and he took a deep breath, the weight of Flint's words settling heavily on his small shoulders. "What do we do?" "We need to come up with a plan," Flint said, his voice firm. "A way to protect you and the community. We can't let them win." Max approached, her expression grave. "What did they say?" Flint held up the communicator, showing her the message. "They want a ransom. If we don't pay, they'll expose ZYX to the authorities." Max's jaw clenched, her resolve hardening. "We can't give in to their demands. We need to show them that we won't be intimidated." Flint nodded, but worry gnawed at him. He glanced at ZYX, who was now visibly shaken. "We'll figure this out, ZYX, together," he reassured him, but doubts lingered in his mind. The path ahead was fraught with danger, and Flint feared for the safety of the boy he had come to care for so deeply. As the villagers began to celebrate their victory, unaware of the looming threat, Flint made a silent vow. He would protect ZYX at all costs, even if it meant facing the darkness that had haunted him for so long. He knew their journey was just beginning. The sun hung low in the polluted sky, casting an eerie orange glow over the crumbling city. Flint stood at the entrance of his workshop, the battered door barely hanging on its hinges, surveying the streets below. The air was thick with tension, a palpable reminder of the threat from the scavengers. They had made it clear that they would stop at nothing to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs, the alien baby who had inadvertently become the center of Flint's world. "Flint," a voice called from within the workshop, cutting through the silence. ZYX, with his shimmering green skin and wide, luminescent eyes, had begun to explore the small space, floating a few inches above the ground as he reached for the scattered tools. Flint turned to see the baby's tiny fingers brushing against a rusted wrench, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Careful there, little buddy," Flint said, a hint of a smile creeping onto his rugged face. "That's not a toy." He stepped inside, feeling a swell of protectiveness as ZYX giggled, his laughter echoing off the metal walls. "You're not exactly a regular kid," are you? ZYX tilted his head, his eyes glowing softly. Flint could almost hear the unspoken question in the air. What does it mean to be normal? Flint shook his head, a wave of sorrow washing over him as he remembered the world outside, one filled with harsh realities and unforgiving dangers. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the street. Flint stiffened, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. Stay close to me, ZYX, he warned, his voice low and urgent. He grabbed a makeshift weapon, a metal pipe, and crept toward the door. The last thing he wanted was to face the scavengers head-on, but he knew they would come for ZYX. They would stop at nothing. As he peered outside, Flint's heart sank. A group of scavengers, their faces twisted by desperation and greed, were advancing toward his workshop. Their leader, a burly man named Garrett, had a wild look in his eyes, and Flint's stomach churned at the sight. There he is, Garrett shouted, pointing directly at Flint. The mechanic with the alien. Flint gripped the pipe tightly, ready to defend his newfound friend. You're not taking him, he shouted back, his voice laced with defiance. You'll have to go through me first. The scavengers laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that grated on Flint's nerves. We don't want to hurt you, Flint, Garrett sneered, stepping forward, but you're making it awfully difficult. Just hand over the baby, and we'll leave you in one piece. Not a chance, Flint barked, glancing back at ZYX, who was now floating just behind him, sensing the escalating tension. ZYX, can you? Flint began. But before he could finish, ZYX's eyes flared with a brilliant light. A shimmering barrier enveloped Flint, and the air crackled with energy. The scavengers paused, their expressions shifting from confidence to confusion. What the hell? Garrett stammered, eyes wide with disbelief. What kind of trick is this? Flint felt a surge of hope. It's no trick, he said, a fierce pride swelling in his chest. It's ZYX. He's more powerful than you think. With a sudden rush, the scavengers lunged forward, desperation driving them. Flint braced himself, determined to protect ZYX at all costs. The barrier flickered but held firm as the first scavenger collided with it, bouncing back with a yelp. Keep it up, ZYX. Flint shouted, adrenaline coursing through him. You can do this. ZYX's face contorted in concentration, the glow around him intensifying. More scavengers charged, but Flint felt an unyielding strength within the barrier. It was as if ZYX's energy was amplifying his own resolve, and Flint pushed forward, swinging the pipe at the nearest scavenger. The clang of metal rang out, echoing through the chaos. Get him! Get the baby! Garrett yelled, his voice cracking with rage. Flint fought with every ounce of strength, blocking blows and striking back, but the scavengers were relentless. Suddenly, ZYX's barrier wavered, flickering dangerously. ZYX, focus. You can do this, Flint urged, but ZYX's small face was scrunched in effort, beads of sweat forming on his brow. In a moment of desperation, Flint lunged forward, intercepting a scavenger aiming for ZYX. The two collided, and Flint felt the wind knocked out of him as they tumbled to the ground. Gasping for breath, he looked up just in time to see ZYX's glow explode outward in a brilliant flash, sending the scavengers sprawling. As the dust settled, Flint struggled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. ZYX, he called, relief flooding through him as he saw the baby hovering a few feet away, his eyes wide with surprise. You did it. But before Flint could reach him, a sudden roar of engines filled the air. Flint's heart sank as he turned to see a massive armored truck barreling down the street, emblazoned with the insignia of the oppressive regime. They're here, Flint shouted, panic gripping him. We need to go now. ZYX's eyes darted between Flint and the approaching vehicle, his innocence stark against the backdrop of chaos. Flint rushed toward him, grabbing the baby and holding him close. Stick with me, ZYX. We're getting out of here.